just wonderful being here, but also listening to the two speakers beforehand. Because when we talk about leadership, there's no better example than people who've said, look, I went out there and I saw what was happening, and in both cases they didn't say, I've got it figured out and I know what to do. This is, here's the answer. They both exhibited this tremendous capacity to say, I'm not sure, I'm going to try and learn. And I'm really impressed with that, because so often when we're dealing, I do a lot of work around the world, and when we're dealing with difficult, complex issues, you often hear people say, gosh, what do I do? I'm afraid I don't know. And I think, what an interesting sentence. I'm afraid I don't know. Now, I'm not sure what point in human history we got to the idea that not knowing was something to be afraid of. I prefer to think that our leadership is around, I don't know, but I'm not afraid. That is, I'm prepared to go out and learn. I'm prepared to go out and discover, to try and find out what's really going on here. Because one of the biggest challenges we've got is a surplus of opinion and a surplus of solutions and visions all over the place, whereas I think we need a lot more learning and empathy. And I think the two previous speakers just epitomised that so well. Going into that space and saying, I'm not sure, I can see something's not working. I'm going to learn as we go along with it as well. Which is just a magic space to be in when so many people are saying, no, it's all right, I've got the vision. And if you've got a vision, you really want to think about, well, what's that look like? I mean, is it really someone's vision that we have children in detention, wars, crumbling infrastructure, inequality? We sort of hope not, but it sort of gives a sense of how shallow vision can be and how much we have to get into that space, as we've seen with those two previous speakers, of learning, wow, I can see something's not working. Too often we say there's some problem and we're trying to fix it. A lot more challenging for us is the notion, no, that's the system actually working as it was designed. So our leadership becomes a lot more challenging as we have to sort of step into that space and actually challenge some of the assumptions, some of the prevailing ideas about what's going on. So to try and touch on some of that, I want to talk to you about a place many of you might not know. I'm going to use a few examples along the way. But I want to talk about Madagascar, which is a place I spent almost 3 years in as senior advisor to the President. Interesting country. It's not just a cartoon. It's a real place. And some of the bits of the cartoon might have been accurate, but it's all right. It's off the coast of Africa in the Indian Ocean. Has about the same population as Australia. So it's quite a large country, very well endowed. Lots of people, very poor. About 85% of the population lives on less than $1 a day. And Madagascar is interesting because it has many remote areas. And one of the remote areas I was in, it takes like 2 days travelling by bus and then another day walking just to get there. And it's fascinating because it can give us a little insight into human nature, into what it means to actually struggle with some of these issues we've just been hearing about from the other speakers. But I want to take it out of our own space and put it into here. I was in a village, remote village, and I was sitting in the hut with the chief of that village. And he's, I'm interested in decision making. And so I say to him, hey, how do you make important decisions? Fair enough question. He sort of looks at me and says, well, the night before an important decision needs to be made, I go into a trance and I speak with the king from 1,000 years ago, and he tells me the answer. And then the next morning he comes out and says to the villagers, this is what the king said. Everyone's ancestor worshipping culture. Everyone says, that's great. The king has spoken. That's it. That's the decision. Okay. I mean, they've lasted a few thousand years on that basis, so you can't fault it. They're probably doing better than the US Congress, or even our own Senate in a way. So it's like, okay. But they're having a few problems because trying to connect them into the rest of the country's infrastructure, the idea came up about building a bridge across a river to help connect. And everyone's saying, yeah, this is a great idea. They said, oh, okay. Well, he's got to consult the king. So that night, he goes into his trance, speaks with the king. Next morning he comes out, no bridge. I'm like, what? He said, yeah, the king said no bridge. I'm like, but, you wanted this thing. Yeah, but, that's the decision. Now, of course, being a good Australian from Canberra and elsewhere, I said to him, well, do you have an appeal mechanism, maybe? King from 500 years ago? He's like, no. King from 1,000 years ago. He's the most important. Oh, okay, what do we do? Anyway, I looked down on the ground next to him. He was out in the middle of nowhere, and here's a full-colour poster sitting next to him. I was like, what? Out here? This poster? What's that all about? And I looked down. It's a poster all about good governance decision-making. It's like, huh? Yeah, you know, integrity, consultation, transparency, accountability, all these great words, you know, that we use in public services in places like Australia. Out here in the middle of nowhere. A multi-million-dollar program by the international community to bring good decision-making to Madagascar. Wow, how did it get out here? I look at him, he's just been talking to the king from 1,000 years ago. You know, here's this wonderful poster. I say, what do you think of this poster? He looks at me, looks at the poster, says, I don't know, I can't read. They gave me this brochure as well. Multi-million-dollar program, entirely meaningless when it hits the ground. Guy can't even read it. Like, what's going on? To try and help us understand that, because it connects into our previous two speakers as well. I like to think of issues like a river. In a sense, we see the symptoms and results of something and think, no, that needs to be addressed. Something needs to happen. And our tendency is to rush to action, strategy. Quick, let's do something. Have an action plan. But we know from the major consulting firms that about 80 to 85% of strategic plans never get implemented. They just end up collecting dust on the shelves. And the reason is further upstream are a whole lot of assumptions, as Matt put it, judgments that people make about how the world works. And that's informed further upstream by our values and culture. If you think about it, for this chief, his assumption is if I don't listen to the ancestors, something really bad's going to happen to my village. That's no good. So his role and his values is all around protecting his village. That's a very honourable role. Is he going to give that up because someone's given him a poster and a brochure he can't read? But that's just absurd. But someone spent millions and millions of dollars doing exactly that. And we see this replicated all over the world, in Australia as well. These projects that come in, there's a problem, quick, let's do some action. That's good management. We're going to call it technical work, no drama. But leadership is more in this space. It's adaptive. It's where we've got to shift assumptions and culture, often of the wider community, not just the group you're working in. When the system is the one that's actually got problems, it means we have to intervene into our broader community to try and understand it. But too often we think our assumptions are the ones, oh yeah, we've got it figured out. It's all okay. Well, it's the others who have to change. And I was reminded of how strong our assumptions can be. When I was at the opening of a runway in a more remote place in Madagascar, and this guy was quite cheap, he's great. And he came up to me and said, what's this? I said, oh, it's a tie. He said, what's that all about? I said, well, you know, it's a formal occasion, you know, we wear a tie, you know, like you might wear a sash or a hat or something. It's sort of an identity thing, it shows that we're here. He's going, yeah? I said, wow. It's got this funny point on the end. Couldn't it be round? You can't have a round tie. Yeah, why not? Well, you can't. He said, that knot, that looks really tight. So you can tell I'm on slippery ground here, right? You go around all day with a funny piece of cloth with a point on the end and a tight knot wrapped around your neck. Like, you guys are so weird. I'm thinking, hey, yeah, but you go up to Parliament and find someone who's not running around with a coloured piece of cloth with a funny point on the end. But we just take it for granted. We're actually proud of it. Oh yeah, I got a tie. You know, I belong to this group. We see it as part of our identity. Often these assumptions, these judgments we have, they're like ties around our necks. They're weighing us down, but we don't see them. So a lot of our leadership, how do we question that? How do we look and say, hang on, that doesn't seem right. We have to do more. And that adaptation becomes critical because in nature, adaptation occurs through trial and error. It doesn't occur through some organism suddenly bouncing up saying, hey, I think I can get legs and arms and run off and evolve. It's like, no. Thousands of little experiments. Some work, some don't. We're always testing, trial and error. We don't know. We can't be afraid of not knowing. It's just that we don't know. So we've got to really be out there trying to experiment. What works, what doesn't. Unfortunately, in our culture, a lot of what we learn is only the technical side. We think, gosh, we've got a problem here. If we can get the best experts to look at it and come up with the solution, then we only need to persuade people to sell it to them. So, yeah, you'll come on board. See, the experts have all said this is fine. That's great if you've got a technical problem. You want to build a bridge or a building, great. But for those adaptive ones, those difficult issues around values, discrimination, inequality, young people's issues we've just been hearing about, poverty and aid, that can become very difficult. Any of you who have been familiar with the Murray-Darling Basin will know that there was a lot of work done on that, where authorities came in, they got the best scientists in Australia together, they produced a plan and said this is what can work in this, but they didn't manage to connect with people and their values, people and their identity as farmers, as Indigenous custodians of the land, as environmentalists. Said, no, we've got the technical approach, now we just have to persuade people. Let's see what happened in the community when this wonderful expert reports were presented to the community as the solution. And let's see how the community reacted to the evidence. Here's some sound.
Environmentalists warn the cuts to water use don't go far enough, while farmers fear they'll destroy Australia's food bowl.
When the first draft Murray-Darling Basin Plan was released, this is how farmers in the New South Wales town of Griffith reacted.
That's what it deserves. You bunch of wangers.
They feared the recommended cuts to water allocations of 3,000 to 4,000 gigalitres a year would destroy communities along the river.
Isn't that great? So, if we go ahead with good, technical, nothing wrong with evidence, but it's insufficient when we're dealing with communities. As we heard from our previous speakers, when you're engaging with a community, you've got to learn. You've got to work out what are their values, what are the assumptions underlying that. How do we go further? How do we understand? But how we actually look at problems can be difficult. You see, if you saw this, you tend to immediately go, whoa, that's not good. And you're not likely to respond by saying, I think we better have a committee meeting next Monday to discuss this and maybe look at what the evidence might be. Is this something else? We don't. We immediately know, our little amygdala in our mind says, that's not good, I'm out of here, right? But for a lot of our difficult problems, our complex ones, our adaptive ones, we can't react like that. Just during the 15 minutes I'm talking to you now, you think about issues like smoking and lung cancer. There'll be at least 5 people in the world will die from lung cancer. And yet it took us almost half a century to actually say, we've got problems and it's dangerous. Does anyone know the last time someone died from a spider bite in Australia? 1979. But that will cause you to flee the room. But tobacco, well, that takes a long time to sort out. Obesity, overweight. WHO figures suggest in the world, during the 15 minutes we're talking now, 100 people will die. Alcoholism, same number, about 100 people will die in the next 15 minutes. It's like we have these huge problems, but our minds can't grapple with them. So we sort of throw it and say, oh, it's too hard. And once we start on climate change, we're still trying to talk about it, and yet it's supposed to be one of the major issues that we face. So our leadership is often pushing against that notion where people say, if it's too hard, I don't want to know about it. I'm afraid I don't know, so I'll pretend it's not there. And so leadership can be pretty risky, and I like to look back at the origins of words so we can try and understand what's going on. And leadership is interesting. It comes from the Indo-European root, from tens of thousands of years ago. The root word is leet, L-E-I-T, and it means to go forth, which is very encouraging. To die. Now that's a little less encouraging, right? Now they never tell you this when they say, you're going to come to a leadership program. It'll be great. The reason was you went into battle, and whoever was the leader would say, you're the leader today? So like, oh, thanks. Yeah, where are all the arrows pointed? Oh, thanks guys, I'm the leader today. You're actually expected to get killed off. If you survived, you're made into a god. But so much of our leadership today gets termed with this followership. It's like, I just got to get people to follow me. I don't get that. I mean, as students, as kids, you don't want your kids following you. Teachers don't want you don't want to be following someone. Hey, follow me over here. Oh, wonderful. Yes, now follow me over here. What's that all about? You want people growing, learning, inquiring, understanding. And during that process, they're going to make mistakes. And as a parent, teacher, uncle, yourselves, you'll make mistakes too. There's times we make mistakes, we've got to pick ourselves up. Wow, what did we learn? That's the model of leadership we need to take. That curiosity, that learning. We know how to do it in our families, but we sort of miss the point when we get into organisations and nations. A good example of that I like to use often is this guy. This is Charles Sturt, who went wandering into Australia because he had a vision. And too often people got a vision. Yeah, follow me, we've got the vision. He had a vision that there was an inland sea. And he got his group together and convinced people of his vision. Here they are, they're leaving Adelaide. He's there with his 12 companions, most of whom were drunk for the expedition, so that was helpful. 300 sheep, and of course a whaleboat. What's he want a whaleboat for? He's got to sail the inland sea, right? Because he's got a vision. This is what, so off we march. You know? So they're marching into the desert. Anyone ever been to Adelaide and marched into the desert? How long would you carry a whaleboat for? Not long at all. Yeah, like a week, a month. You know. Well, a year later, right, they're still carrying the whaleboat. They've travelled 1,000 kilometres inland to Australia. Starts writing in his diary, you wait and see, my vision is sound. This is the most important thing in our journey. His colleagues are writing in their diary as well. There's no inland sea. We all know that. But they're doing the good Australian thing of sucking up to the boss. We've all heard about that. You know? So they're all saying to him, yeah, I think I hear water birds on the horizon. He said, oh, really? Oh, wow, you're my friend for today. Oh, great. Yeah, oh, no, I think I see water on the... Oh, great. So he's so desperate to have his vision proven right. Now, unfortunately, this is how our ministers' offices work, CEO offices work, right? Everyone's there. It's not having a vision is a problem. It's the lack of confronting the reality of what's happening. And people say that, yeah, it's a great idea, and then they go out in the corridor in the car park, and they go, oh, that's crazy. That'll never work. We don't have the resources. What's this guy thinking? What are we going to do? Part of our leadership is how do we see more broadly? How do we build on that? See, for Sturt, even his idea of what he was walking into, he saw desert. Desert is hot and dry. In that same region, Indigenous people have over 200 words for desert. Desert where you find water, desert where you find food. They read that desert like we might read a book. But for Sturt, all he could see was desert. And so he wasn't able to get that depth of understanding. And that's what we've got to strive for. So I'm going to suggest to you that our leadership is about increasing capacity. It's not about solving problems, but about how we solve the problems. Our previous speakers were so clear on that. It wasn't they went in and fixed something. They went in and engaged and started to say, wow, how do we expand how we do this? How do we look at it anew? That's critical, because for some of the big issues that we face worldwide, we just don't touch on them. If you think about poverty, I hear, I work in a lot of this area around the world. People say, oh, it's too hard. Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, poverty is a choice we make. Let's be really clear, whether in Australia or internationally. We know internationally only 1% of the developed world's annual income is required to end poverty. 1%. We have a world economy that is $90 trillion. But often I hear, oh, that would cost $1 billion. We could never do that. I loved hearing Fiona say, wow, we started off with 27,000. Look what she achieved. Imagine what we could do with $1 billion. Oh, but you can't get that. That's interesting. Jeffrey Sachs was doing some figures on that and said, well, what is $1 billion these days? Let's have a look. Roughly 14 hours of Pentagon spending. 1 day's worth of oil exports from Saudi Arabia. 5% of the Christmas bonuses for Wall Street. Less than $1 a year from those in developed countries. And basically the yearly income taxes avoided by big companies. We've got to get a reality into this. But too often our assumptions are weighing us down. It's like, we can't do anything. Remember, your leadership is how do you lead with a question? How do you say, well, heck, why aren't we doing that? Ours is a moral crisis. It's not a financial crisis. It's one where we make decisions, priorities that are going to be based on that. So I'm going to say to you that your leadership in these instances is, how do I lead with a question? Why are we not doing it? What could we do instead? What's really going on here? Why is that happening? And remember, the origins of the word question comes from quest, which means to go on a journey. We heard the previous speakers' personal journeys, but they also related it to the broader journeys that they were on in their sectors. It's so important. You are inviting people to that journey. There's a final little story which I think illustrates that so well. I was working with the Indigenous community in Northern Australia, and at one stage at night we were sitting around with some of the young youth leaders, and they were saying, look, this is so hard. We can't do this. We're out there fighting bushfires on the social issues in our community. Addiction, domestic violence, all these things, they're so overwhelming. We're just fighting bushfires all the time. We don't have time to really reflect and engage. It's too hard. So we're sort of considering this as we're sitting around, and there was an elder who was sitting there as well. And he hadn't said much. And suddenly he piped up and he said, you know what? We haven't been fighting the bushfires. We've just been busy hiding the smoke. It's about time we did something about the flames. I thought, wow, what a fantastic definition of leadership for all of us. A gift from the first people of this nation to all of us about what leadership really looks like. We can keep incredibly busy, having our visions, fighting the bushfires, thinking that we're making progress, but not actually tackling the flames, just hiding the smoke. So with that as a thought for inspiration to move forward, good luck with the rest of your sessions. Thank you.